G'day, I'm Ash, and today I'm going to take you through some of my most hated vehicles in War Thunder. Now, please note that these are my personal least favourite, and you may disagree, that's fine. Leave a comment with your bottom 5 hated tanks or vehicles below. Some of these vehicles are inherently pretty good, and in competent hands can be driven exceptionally well, and well, some of the vehicles in this list are just terrible in general. Number 10 on my list is the Jag-1029K, and this vehicle is on my list because it was a Soviet response to the flak bus, but it's terrible because it has terrible traverse on uneven and undulating ground, and the performance off-road is mediocre at best. The gun's heavy, it's got terrible gun depression, the ammunition choice is rather lacking to say the least, and all the crew are situated outside the vehicle. Why did I pick it? Well, it's terrible in general. Number 9. The M3 Lee as a whole, it just irritates me to the nth degree. The short 75 gun, or should I say the 76 gun, depending on which variant of M3 Lee it is, can provide not the greatest or most effective field of fire. It's about as tall as a house, and with the extra machine gun turrets on the top, it's kind of ugly as all hell. Even the armor profiling on the front is quite an obvious target. No matter which way you look at it, this tank was really just a stopgap, and I really dislike playing this vehicle. The main gun in the hull itself is off-center, so when you fire, you've always got to counteract that. And the 37 is basically on the top in the secondary turret, is the only redeeming factor for this vehicle. But even still, with an underwhelming engine, I really don't like versing or playing this particular vehicle. So that's why it's my number 9. Number 8. The Panzer IV-J. Basically, the Panzer IV-J is less armoured and does not have the extra Schützen German armour. It has a terrible traverse speed, which is about 2 times worse than the Panzer IV-G's turret, and the better option than this vehicle would be the Panzer IV-H, which has the add-on armour and has the fastest traverse speed out of the Panzer IVs. Not only that, the Panzer IV-J is a battle rating 4.0 compared to its, folded counterpart, the Panzer IV-H. So really, you have no reason to get this vehicle unless you're looking for another Panzer IV at a lower battle rating. Even the Panzer Befehlswagen IV is slightly better. It even has the anti-infantry side skirts and various bits and pieces. It's even a command tank, and that's not to mention that the fact that the Panzer IV-J isn't even the one that's featured in Girls on Panzer, so therefore it's the worst tank ever. Number 7. I can't go anywhere without mentioning the 90mm 53 M41M. Basically, it's a rank 2 battle rating 3.7 vehicle, and, well, the gun is absolutely monstrous. It sits on the back of this chassis here. The turret traverse is rather limiting, and the gun depression on the vehicle is absolutely horrendous at -5. Besides that, you've got to traverse over the top of the hull, and it isn't exactly the greatest mobility chassis either. It's quite slow, quite dainty, extremely heavy, and can provide a problem when you're trying to shoot at enemies, as it's only got 8 rounds to choose from. When I mean 8 rounds, it's only got 8 rounds to fire, and then you have to relocate your tank back to the cap point, in which case it isn't exactly the most mobile of vehicles anyway, so it's better supported to a support vehicle, and this is one of the reasons why I hated playing this tank while grinding through the Italian tech tree. With the crew vulnerable to machine gun fire and aircraft, I hate this. Number 6. Do you also hate your team and every aircraft in the sky above your friendly team? Well, this is for you. At 3.7, the whirlwind is possibly one of the most controversial vehicles in War Thunder. The amount of montages I've seen with whirlwinds killing top tier tanks is enough to sort of suggest this vehicle is kind of not broken, not balanced, but on the borderline edge of being borderline crazy. And that's only because of its armor-piercing incendiary tracer shell, which is the Panzergranate 40. Again, with 63mm of penetration, it's not hard to see why this vehicle is possibly the most hated. With a huge amount of fire rate, with 480 rounds per minute at 3.7, if you're seen by this thing even at a range of 1 kilometer, you're fucked, mate. You're absolutely buggered. It's possibly one of the most hated vehicles, if not one of the most played vehicles in War Thunder. Number 5. Unlike French aviation in War Thunder, which I absolutely despise, I quite enjoyed the French tank tree. Apart from Tier 1, that's absolutely horrible. I could put that all on the list, but then it would be just hating on France. Instead, the vehicle that I really disliked grinding through was the AMX M4. It's rank 4 battle rating 6.3. The only redeeming factor about this vehicle is the fact that it's got a 90mm cannon. However, you try maneuvering the gun over the rear of the engine deck, and that causes some traverse issues. It's got a crew of 5, and its mass 52 tons. It's not exactly the smallest vehicle either, it's quite big in its own right. And with little to no armour apart from the 80mm on the front and the 85mm on the front of the turret, it's not exactly the most armoured vehicle, and well, the track size is quite large as well. It's almost as if they modelled that after a Tiger. So in all, it's kind of a bad package, and I really dislike this tank. Number 4. I was rather hesitant to put this on the list only because it's rather a novelty in its own right. This is the LVTA A4 ZIS-2. Think of it this way, you're Chinese and you've just captured a bunch of American equipment after the Second World War. Well, what do? You mount a ZIS-2 Russian cannon in it, and well, now you've basically removed the stabilizer. It's a massive floating target as it's a landing craft, and it can get hull broken, so it's not exactly the most effective vehicle. It's basically a sitting duck with a massive gun, which doesn't have a lot of traverse. Combine this with the fact that its on-land speed is quite slow and sluggish, its in-water speed is even worse. Considering it's an amphibious assault craft, even though it's a rank 2 battle rating 2.3, it has 12mm of hull armour, and it's not exactly the greatest. It's basically a novelty event vehicle, and I dislike this a lot. Number 3. Possibly one of the most ambitious projects the British ever undertook. This is the Churchill Gun Carrier, a laughable effort at that. The idea was to use the existing hull of a Churchill and turn it into a casemate tank destroyer. However, it's basically a big heavy target. It's aesthetically not pleasing. It has massive flat armor on the front and terrible overall maneuverability. I could see where they got their pointers from. The Jägerpanzer's 4s, the German tank destroyers, were fairly effective in their concealed position, but this thing is the size of a barn and extremely hard to maneuver when you've got someone on your flank. Is this a terrible vehicle? Yes, but its meme status sort of elevates this vehicle, and during one of the loot drop crates that you get from sometimes participating in battles, I won a talisman for this thing. And I still hate the vehicle even though it's got a talisman. Churchill Gun Carrier. Ugh. Number 2. Imagine you're the slowest heavy tank in the world and, well, your country is getting invaded. Well, this is the B1 Biz. It's a rank 2 battle rating 2.0 vehicle. It's rather slow, it's rather cumbersome, and the 75 main millimeter gun is mediocre at best. It doesn't exactly have the greatest traverse, and you usually have to use the hull with the vehicle. It's quite a pain to do so. Even though it is a relatively small crew with a crew of 4, it isn't exactly the greatest either. Even the secondary 47mm in its own turret is mediocre at best. Combine this with the fact that the turret rotation is rather abysmal. So you've got an overall package which is quite heavily armoured, quite slow, but decently unprotected. And at best it can do, well, what it could do in 1940 when the French were surrendering. Anyway, number 1. When I got given my first Tier 6 by Guardian, which was the Challenger Mark II, I was appalled by it. It's basically a medium to long range support vehicle that is less effective due to its hull armour. It, when stock, has a stock shell that is really terrible and has lower penetration than most of the other vehicles you are versing. It can't brawl effectively, as the armour isn't as good as other vehicles, and whilst the mobility is better than most, it is, well, better than the Chieftains, and that's really its only upside. The biggest thing I hate about this vehicle is the fact that you have to play it like a support tank, and while it's fantastic in that role at medium to long ranges, at short range and close range when you have to go into the city or a town, it is utterly pathetic. Anyway, that's my top 10 list of most hated vehicles. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know down below what is your top 5 hated vehicles. My name's Ash, and I'll catch you in the next one.